During the fourth and most recent RE Requiem trailer, Capcom confirmed a new mutation caused by the T-virus called Raccoon City Syndrome. While there are still a ton of questions that we have about this new virus that the survivors of Raccoon City are infected with, there was also a lot of information revealed to us. On top of that, there's a lot of details and traits about this new mutation of the T-virus that we can gather based on events that took place prior to the start of Resident Evil Requiem that ultimately paints a better picture for us. So on this episode of Nerdspace Games, I decided that we should just dive into the history of the Raccoon City Syndrome and explore everything we know about it before Requiem releases in just over a week from now. That way we can try to understand it and identify some important bits of information before diving into the story of RE9 on February 27th. Before that, consider subscribing to the channel for more constant updates on survival horror games, including Resident Evil Requiem. Also, I do have an official shop for the channel with custom made designs inspired by Resident Evil characters. Now currently we have the iconic moment of Chris punching a boulder design available, but there's more planned for the future, so stay tuned for more designs soon. But with that out of the way, my name is Ruben with Nerdspace Games, and here's everything we know about the Raccoon City Syndrome and Resident Evil Requiem. Let's get it. Now, the biggest reveal in regards to Raccoon City Syndrome is the fact that it's basically a mutation of the T-virus, the very same virus that infected the midwestern town of Raccoon City, hence the name. So I believe the first thing we need to do before addressing Raccoon City Syndrome, or RCS for short, is to first look at the history of the T-virus, since a lot of the characteristics of that virus will carry over to RCS. Now, the creation of the T-virus can be traced all the way back to a plant in West Africa called the Stairway to the Sun. Researchers Oswald E. Spencer, James Marcus, Edward Ashford, and Brandon Bailey would find this plant and create a virus called the progenitor virus. In its current state, the progenitor virus was pretty unstable and unable to serve the purpose that Umbrella's CEO Spencer was trying to use it for, to force human evolution in a short period of time. Essentially, he wanted to create a superior human race with this virus, and to do this, multiple researchers at Umbrella would begin to use the progenitor virus in different unorthodox experiments. Eventually, James Marcus would create the Tyrant virus, aka the T-virus, by splicing Queen Leech DNA with the progenitor virus. The ultimate goal of the T-virus was to increase physical abilities while also allowing the host to live even when vital organs failed. Instead, the T-virus would eventually kill the host and make them aggressive with a never-ending hunger that would ultimately lead to them becoming cannibalistic. Basically, it turned them into zombies. But that wasn't the only problem with the T-virus. Another issue that Spencer and the rest of the researchers at Umbrella had with this virus was that a whopping 10% of the entire population on Earth carried antibodies that made certain people immune to the T-virus, meaning even when they were bit or infected via a contaminated water source, they would still not change into zombies like everybody else. Instead, the T-virus would remain dormant inside of the host, appearing to not have any effect on the host for years, potentially decades, making most people unaware of the fact that they were even infected with the T-virus to begin with. Now fast forward to September of 1998, an outbreak occurred in the midwestern town of Raccoon City thanks to a leak of the T-virus into the water supply for the city. Because obviously everybody in the city used the water at some point in time, essentially everybody in the city was infected with the T-virus. However, even though everybody inside of Raccoon City was infected with the T-virus, 10% of the population of Raccoon City didn't show any symptoms of being infected due to their antibodies in their blood. Yeah, you can literally point your finger at anybody that was in the city when the outbreak occurred, and there's almost a 100% chance that the T-virus entered their body at some point before they escaped the city. Yeah, this means characters like Claire Redfield, Leon Kennedy, Carlos Oliveira, Alyssa Ashcroft, and many more carried the T-virus inside of them despite never showing any symptoms. However, there's some other details that are worth mentioning. Since we don't know how the vaccines and antiviruses affect this dormant strand of the T-virus, I think we should point out some unique circumstances with some of the survivors. Jill Valentine was infected by Nemesis, a BOW that not only carried the T-virus inside of it, but also a parasite that was similar to Las Plagas. However, Jill Valentine received a vaccine for the T-virus that ultimately neutralized, well, sort of neutralized the T-virus, but left her with certain side effects. More on that later. Sherry Birkin is another unique circumstance due to her being infected with the G-virus, a more aggressive strand of the T-virus that can only bond with certain individuals based on their DNA. However, like Jill, Sherry eventually received a vaccine that prevented her transformation into a monster like the one her father, William Birkin, became in RE2. Finally, the last unique circumstance I want to talk about are the outbreak survivors. These survivors, which include Alyssa Ashcroft, Yoko Suzuki, and 6 more, synthesized another vaccine called the Daylight vaccine. This vaccine removed all traces of the T-virus inside of them, or so we believe, and it allowed them to escape the city without turning into zombies after escaping. Now, as far as we know, there's a total of 10 Raccoon City survivors that received some sort of vaccine or antivirus before escaping the city, but again, more on that later. As for the rest of the survivors that escaped the city, since they didn't receive any sort of vaccine vaccine or antivirus that we know of, they all carried a dormant strain of the T-virus inside of them that they appeared to be immune to thanks to the antibodies inside of their blood. With that being said, Resident Evil Requiem dropped a bombshell on these survivors, as now it doesn't look like they are as safe as they originally thought. So in the last trailer, we do see Sherry Birkin looking at a file submitted to the United States Department of Defense by Rhodes Hill Care Center. This file was in regards to something called the Raccoon City Syndrome. According to this file, the survivors of Raccoon City weren't completely safe from the T-virus. In fact, the T-virus remained dormant inside of their blood throughout all of these years. However, almost 30 years later, the T-virus inside of their blood started to mutate. This new mutation would earn the name Raccoon City Syndrome due to the fact that only survivors of the Raccoon City incident, because of the T-virus that lay dormant inside of them, would eventually experience these symptoms that would lead to their death before changing them into a new breed of zombies. Now, the Raccoon City Syndrome comes in 4 stages. Stage 0, dormant. As you would expect, this stage of the virus is undetectable due to the immunity that the host has against the T-virus. However, unbeknownst to the host, the T-virus would mutate and change over time before eventually entering stage 1. Stage 1, activation. This is when the symptoms begin to appear. The virus changes to a black color, causing black marks and bruise marks all over the body, slowly spreading over time. Now, stage 2 is development. This is when the virus arguably begins to get more dangerous and eventually leads to a critical condition for the host. In this stage, the virus will spread all over the body, causing black marks all over the host's skin. It'll also begin to affect vital organs, increasing the speed of the infection, making this stage potentially the fastest stage, as it eventually enters stage 3 moments after the development stage. And stage 3, terminal. At this point, your death is near, as hosts at this stage ultimately die within 1 to 2 hours after entering this stage. You know you're in this stage when the host begins to cough up and vomit blood. They will also have a hard time at moving due to severe pain all over their body. This is the final stage before they die. Okay, so now that we know all about the Raccoon City Syndrome, there's something else that we need to address. Who is in danger because of RCS? Who's safe from this mutation? Well, this is actually an interesting question that I think it's very complicated due to the amount of survivors that made it out of Raccoon City and the unique circumstances for each of them. Let's start with the obvious, Leon Kennedy. Clearly, it's already confirmed that Leon has Raccoon City Syndrome. In the trailers, we've already seen that he's in the activation phase, potentially even the development phase. And if we are able to assume that Leon is experiencing this mutation, then clearly Claire Redfield unfortunately probably is as well. Claire entered the city at the exact same time that Leon did, and she's experienced almost exactly the same type of things that Leon experienced while he was in the city. So if he's infected, then it's safe to say that Claire is infected as well, which again goes along with my whole theory that Claire might die in Resident Evil Requiem, but that's a different topic for a different video, so don't worry, I'm not going to talk about that. Other people that kind of fall into a similar situation as Claire and Leon include Carlos Oliveira and Ada Wong. I say these two are in similar situations because they both arrived in Raccoon City around the same time as Leon and Claire did as well, but they also didn't receive any sort of vaccine or antivirus like some of the other protagonists of the series did. So I think we need to assume that they could be experiencing Raccoon City Syndrome as well. Carlos specifically is an interesting case because while Ada Wong works constantly alongside other organizations that may have been able to synthesize a vaccine for her to completely neutralize the T-virus in her blood, I don't think Carlos can say the same thing. Keep in mind that Carlos immediately went from Raccoon City to South America, in which he went into hiding, and he has pretty much been MIA ever since the Raccoon City incident. So it's very possible that he could have mutated already and infected the residents of whatever small village or town he's currently hiding out in. Yeah, kind of a scary thought for Carlos, and honestly, it's really not looking good for him at all. I mean, even if they somehow develop a vaccine or cure by the end of this game, how are they going to get it to Carlos? Like, how are they going to find Carlos and get him this vaccine if he's like MIA and hiding out somewhere in South America? Hopefully Jill can help with that. But let's move on. Before addressing the survivors that received some sort of vaccine and discussing their chances of ending up with RCS, I do want to focus on one other group of survivors, the survivors of the Arklay Mountains incident that left town before the Raccoon City outbreak. I think it's worth talking about them because there's no guarantee that they are completely safe just because they weren't in Raccoon City when the outbreak occurred. It's possible that they could have been infected with the T-virus somehow while they were in the Arklay Mountains, which means that characters like Chris Redfield, Rebecca Chambers, Barry Burton, and Billy Cohen could also all be infected with Raccoon City Syndrome somehow. However, since we don't know for sure if any of them were directly infected with the T-virus at any point in time, like the Raccoon City survivors were, I think it's safe to rule them out for now. Besides, let's not forget that Chris is alive and well long after the events of Requiem, so we can at least assume that he, at the very least, was either saved from it or was never infected with it during this current time period. So this brings us to the final group of people that could be affected by Raccoon City Syndrome. the people that receive some sort of vaccine or antivirus before escaping Raccoon City. We can't confirm if the vaccines that each of them took completely neutralized the T-virus inside of them or not, but there is one thing that might make us think none of them are actually safe either. Looking back at the most recent trailer, Sherry Birkin appears to be wearing black gloves while on her computer. Now, she could be wearing these black gloves because she's trying to cover up fingerprints, because she's hacking into confidential government files, so she's just trying to keep herself safe. But despite saying that, there's also no denying the fact that she could be experiencing Raccoon City Syndrome. Considering the fact that we just saw Leon pull off his glove to reveal the marks moments before we see this scene with Sherry, and the fact that she says we're running out of time instead of he's running out of time, yeah, I can't help but think that Sherry's experiencing the same mutation that Leon is. However, this ultimately creates an interesting situation if Sherry Birkin has Raccoon City Syndrome as well. Remember, Sherry Birkin received a vaccine courtesy of Claire and Annette before she escaped the city. Sure, she still had a unique side effect that gave her rapid healing abilities, but that doesn't change the fact that she received some sort of vaccine that appeared to neutralize the virus in her blood. So if Sherry's infected, it does create concerns for Jill Valentine, Alyssa Ashcroft, and the rest of the outbreak survivors as well. Now, with that being said, one thing that is worth mentioning is that the group of survivors each took 3 different types of vaccines. Sherry took a vaccine that didn't exactly neutralize the G-virus, but rather prevented her from mutating into something similar to her father. Perhaps that's why she's still experiencing Raccoon City Syndrome, because the T-virus wasn't neutralized inside of her, as this vaccine was just meant to prevent farther mutation by the G-virus specifically, not neutralize the entire T-virus or G-virus inside of her. Jill Valentine, on the other hand, took a vaccine that was synthesized by a different doctor, Nathaniel. This vaccine was specifically created to neutralize the effects of the T-virus, so perhaps Jill could be safe from RCS, unlike Sherry. But again, we also know that Jill exhibited side effects, meaning that something from the T-virus still in a way lives on in her blood, so she could still be in trouble as well. On top of that, the vaccine that was created by Dr. Bard saved Jill and caused her to age slower than most humans, but it didn't completely eradicate the virus. And finally, there's the outbreak survivors, which includes Alyssa Ashcroft, Grace's mother, and Yoko Suzuki, and Kevin Reitman, and many more. These survivors took something called the Daylight Cure, which was a vaccine created by a professor at Raccoon City University, Peter Jenkins. Interestingly enough, despite appearing in a spin-off game, this vaccine completely eliminated all traces of the T-virus inside of infected individuals. Based on that observation, and if this is true, then that would mean that the outbreak survivors, like Alyssa Ashcroft, are ironically the most safe from the Raccoon City Syndrome. This is of course if we assume that the Daylight vaccine did indeed completely eliminate all traces of the virus, like Jenkins believed it did. Of course, if we do go off of this theory, then it would explain why Alyssa didn't show any symptoms of Raccoon City Syndrome in the trailers. It would also contradict a theory that I had about some of the victims Leon mentioned in the last trailer being Outbreak characters. In fact, I'm actually leaning towards none of the Outbreak main characters being any of the 6 victims anymore, despite what I said in my last video, because of this new information I found out about in regards to the Daylight Cure. Still, NPCs in the Outbreak games are still free game, just saying. But yeah, with all that said, that's about everything we know about the Raccoon City Syndrome. As you would expect, there's so many questions about this new mutated version of the T-virus. The biggest being, what beloved protagonists of the series are experiencing the mutation, and which ones will appear in this game and potentially bite the bullet. We already know Leon is infected, and potentially Sherry as well. I also find it hard to believe that Claire doesn't appear in this game even briefly, showing symptoms that she's infected with it too. Perhaps that's Leon's main motivation in finding a cure for the Raccoon City Syndrome, not to save himself, but to save Claire and Sherry. I mean, Leon is the self-sacrificing hero that would put his body in harm's way if it meant saving the people he cared about. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts about Raccoon City Syndrome. Did I miss anything? Also, who are you most worried about being killed by this new virus? And do you think any other Raccoon City survivor will show up outside of Leon and Sherry? Hit up the comments and let me know your thoughts down below. But thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerd Space Games. Take care.